and welcome to the GasCast podcast, where we're going to be discussing the different sources of greenhouse gas emissions. I'm today's host, Phil, and we got here with us.
I'm Brian.
I'm Nate.
Glenn.
I'm Sam.
And today we're going to be talking about the nitrous oxide emissions from the fertilizers we use in agriculture. So in today's episode, we're going to be looking at greenhouse gas emissions from nitrous oxide, which come from the fertilizers we use in agriculture. According to the EPA, around 74% of nitrous oxide emissions come from agricultural soil management, and there's been a steady increase in nitrous oxide in the atmosphere every year since the Industrial Revolution. So why do the fertilizers we use in agriculture produce so much nitrous oxide gas? You guys have any idea where all this gas comes from?
From agriculture?
Yeah.
What are the mechanics of the releasing of gas from the fertilizer?
So when we spray the fertilizers, they're in a liquid form, and through the nitrogen fixing bacteria in the soil, they will take the different nutrients and convert them into nitrogen and usable nutrients for the plants. But some of those bacteria also convert it into nitrous oxide gas, and then that gets released into the air as a pollutant. And so nitrous oxide is around 300 times stronger than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas, and much of that comes from the fact that it's similar to the CFCs that were destroying the ozone layer.
So in what concentration is NO2 in the atmosphere compared to CO2? Is there a lot of NO2? Or
there's about...
Because I know there's a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere, which is,
that's the majority.
Besides water vapor.
Yeah, it makes up roughly 6% of the gas emissions or greenhouse gases in the atmosphere.
Interesting.
But what's kind of nice about them is that even though they are a really, strong gas, they have a relatively short life in the stratosphere compared to other gases like methane.
What do you mean by that? It dissipates quicker?
Yeah, it has a shorter lifetime up in the air, so...
It gets recycled back into the different cycles.
Yeah, it once it's up in the atmosphere, it generally stays there less than gases like methane, but more than things like other gases. And so one of the reasons we could be reducing our fertilizer use is because we'll be able to see the biggest change in atmospheric greenhouse gases, because if we can reduce nitrous oxide, there is going to be, we'll see the effects of reducing our gases a lot quicker. So now, do you guys think if we do reduce our use of nitrous oxide, will we see a huge effect, or will it just be lost compared to the rest?
There'll be an effect, but using less fertilizer that produces NO2. Do you know if there's a particular region or plant or crop that they use this particular fertilizer for, or is it all fertilizers, basically?
Yeah, pretty much all fertilizers release nitrous oxide, but there are different crops use different amount of fertilizers. So a huge one that uses a ton to grow is corn, and our top producing crop in the United States here is corn.
Yeah.
So we go through a lot of fertilizers just for corn production.
Right. And I believe I saw that in particular the Midwest is obviously a big producer of corn, and a lot of the chemicals from the fertilizer, including NO2, is being leaked into the natural water cycles of the area, and actually eventually ending up in the Mississippi River, which is all being carried down into the Gulf of Mexico. So I believe that's a very big problem because there's a lot of fertilizers being used here in the Midwest. So maybe we do need to cut back on the fertilizers.
So then that also brings up the question, does the effect of nitrous oxide, is it different in the atmosphere versus like in the waters?
Right.
Like, can it affect like wildlife too, like fish?
Exactly. It's not just our atmosphere being affected, it's our whole entire ecosystems. It's being affected by our nitrous oxide.
Yeah, like even if it's, you know, how it's going down the Mississippi River too, being carried by it too. If the Mississippi River floods and the whole floodplain is getting exposed too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so one way we could reduce the amount of fertilizers we use have been through polymer-coated fertilizers, which break down a lot slower in the soil, giving them more chance to be absorbed into the plant. Because most of the fertilizers we use now, we just kind of spray everywhere, and they relatively don't stay in the soil that long. Most of them get, released into the atmosphere as nitrous oxide gas, or they'll be leached into the soil, or they'll just completely run off, like, into the Mississippi. So with these slow release fertilizers, they'll be able to stay in the ground a lot longer and break down a tiny bit more slower than the fertilizers we use now. And so once they break down slower, they'll have more of a chance to get absorbed instead of just running off. The problem with these fertilizers, though, is that they're a bit more expensive, and the polymers that they use are petroleum-based, so it's adding another source of plastic pollution. So I don't know what you guys would say about these, because we don't want more plastic waste in the soil just to solve the fertilizer issue.
Yeah, there's like, it's also, it kind of reminds me of the whole, that microplastics are like a super big like deal right now. A lot of hubbub about it.
Yeah.
And it's just like switching from microplastics in the ocean to microplastics in the soil.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'd end up creating more plastic waste.
It's just like switching the problems.
Yeah, we'd just be creating another
Yeah.
problem, solving one problem.
It also seemed like if we had less of a corn production, how effective is this, like, compared to like the other fertilizers? I guess.
And sometimes, like, there's other techniques, but I think the polymer coated fertilizers can have up to like a 50% reduction in fertilizer use. So we'd be cutting our fertilizer use in half just by switching to these special types of fertilizers that they'll get a lot more done than just the traditional ones that we use now.
So it increased crop yield, or?
I'd say we'd get the same amount of crop yield just with less fertilizer.
What is the effect of microplastics in crops?
I'm not entirely sure what they would do to the crops, but having a ton of plastic in the soil would probably not be something we want, because they can break down even further and release other toxic chemicals.
Yeah, imagine it'd be like, depending how much it produces, it'd be like diluting the actual good soil, and eventually, like, when it does break down in like 100 years or whatever, it's gonna release just like chemicals into the soil.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it'll restrict the crops, like the roots of the crops, from gaining their nutrients.
So one of the things we could do is use a non-petroleum based polymer to coat these fertilizers, which would solve that use.
What would that be? Like a different polymer?
Yeah, it would be a more natural polymer, not from petroleum. It's like, either way, if we figured out a way to get these fertilizers to have a non-plastic use a non-plastic based like polymer, these would have like a huge potential to decrease the amount of fertilizer we use. So I don't know, what other ways do you think we could reduce our fertilizer use?
So, I don't really know too much about stuff, but when it comes to fertilizing crops, I think they also do just, in certain cases, add just straight up, like, solid chemicals to it. You know, like we know this needs more salt or potassium in the soil, so they bring, like, bags and just, like, dump it and till it into the ground.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what the difference is between fertilizer and just, like, putting basically nutrients in the ground. Maybe it's just, like, an
Right.
accessibility, like...
I mean, I know that, like, for a long time, like, in rural places, like, such as, like, India or other places like that, they, like, often use, like, cow manure as, like, fertilizer that helps their crops grow, which I'm sure, like, contains natural nutrients for the crops, but also I'm sure it contains...
But still gives off greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another example of just switching the problem somewhere else, just like those plastics.
Yeah. So using those things like cow manure and other natural fertilizers will be better than the synthetic ones that we use, because, like Brian said, they have a bunch of other beneficial nutrients and properties that actually keep those nutrients in the soil a lot longer. So cow manure can also do what the polymer fertilizers do and keep the nutrients in the soil instead of having them run off everywhere. And so another way we can reduce nitrogen loss is through just applying the fertilizers correctly. So spraying the fertilizer down to the roots and applying them in the correct amount can also cut our nitrous oxide emissions from about 50%. And so improving just our fertilizer efficiency will be a lot better. And plus it will reduce the amount of waste, all the fertilizer waste that we have. I mean, we're wasting a huge amount of fertilizer just spraying our crops in an irresponsible way, which is why we see all of that flowing into the Mississippi and going and creating these huge algae blooms in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, so like like spraying or like applying it in bulk to like your whole crop like as fast as you can instead of like doing like spot fertilizing, like really how do you call that? What's the word for that? Very concentrated.
Yeah, very concentrating, and just improving the way we irrigate our crops would reduce a lot, because if we over irrigate our crops, we're just creating more and more soil runoff and more nitrogen leaching in, like further into the ground where it's not going to be absorbed.
Yeah, you know what? Speaking of the irrigation overflowing, it reminds me of this Shark Tank episode where this guy basically he made like a plastic cone with an opening at the bottom, the big end, and at the top it was like the small end, but it was also open. So like what you'd do, you'd put like a cone, like this is like the stem. Imagine like a stem and there's like a cone around the bottom.
Yeah.
And there's like you plug in like your hose system to it, and it like specifically, because it's like a cone covering the very bottom, it specifically just waters like the tight area right around it. And apparently like his deal was that it like cut like water like use by like a lot.
Yeah.
So
Did he sell it?
I think he did. He really like lowballed. He was like, like $1 for like each one.
It was like cheap material.
Cheap, and he's like, yeah, but I'm not selling like a small amount. He's like, I'm selling like 20,000 to like a farmer for like one of his fields.
It's like that video she showed us with the guy just making like a homemade irrigation system with a hose, like just poking holes in it. It's like really cheap for your garden.
Yeah, and those drip, like the drip irrigation systems work a lot better than like overhead sprinkler, and though it gives the soil a more appropriate amount of moisture. Not only that, we can also get different types of cover crops, especially in winter. So I'm pretty sure many of you guys have seen, just driving around here, there's still like a lot of crops in the soil still, or mainly just like their husks, but
Yeah.
they keep like the dead crops there to keep the soil and the nutrients held together. Because over the winter, once like the snow melts, and if there's nothing there holding the soil, a lot of it's just gonna reduce the productivity of the soil once spring hits.
So when they plant new crops, do they have to take out all those roots right before?
Yeah, they'd take out all the old roots and husks from the ground and get ready for their spring crops. But that's another way of just having better soil management.
And same thing, like I imagine there's also a cost in actually manufacturing the fertilizer that they use. So, I mean, I'm sure it's done, but just using the leftover parts of the plant for fertilizer, some guy with some tractors, what they're called, apparently, I forgot, like rolls up and takes all the corn husks and like grinds them down, like the stalks and everything, and turns that into fertilizer. So that'd at least cut down the emissions in producing the actual fertilizer if they reuse that, because they can't just keep growing stuff in the same field year after year without the soil becoming malnutritious.
Yeah.
Or malnourished, I should say. So they got to like add stuff back, which kind of comes in with the fertilizer. So trying to reduce the amount that you actually take away from the field could be another way to reduce fertilizer use.
Yeah. That's like another reason we rotate there's crop rotation. It will help add some of the essential nutrients back into the soil. So I think like plants like lentils have like a symbiotic relationship with these like type of mushrooms, I believe, or bacteria. And what they do is that the plants provide nutrients to the mushroom, and then the mushroom in return gives them back nutrients in like a weird way. And so things like that will also help. Just using just overall having better soil management, irrigation management, fertilizer management. That alone will just have a huge effect in how much nitrous oxide is being released into the atmosphere. And it's something we can do relatively easy. It's not like it's not like a different source of emissions where we have to, change all our energy sources to renewables or get all the cars off the road into battery cars. So this is like one of those low-hanging fruits that we could tackle, and we could tackle them today with relative ease. So overall, reducing our nitrous oxide emissions comes down to how well we can manage our soil, our water, and our fertilizer use. And some of the ways we can do that is through crop rotation, different types of crop selection. Reducing our tilling of the land will also help a lot. And it's something we can do right now. It's not like we're waiting for a leap in technology or to get some new. So it's not like we're waiting for a leap in technology. It's something we can do right now, and it's relatively easy. So I think just starting from better management and better care would, significantly decrease the amount of emissions from fertilizers.
So what you're saying is we need a leap in not technology but an agriculture culture or business culture,
Yeah.
industry. You need
The industry policy.
industry policy and morals
Industry policy and efficiency.
and efficiency.
All right, and this has been the GasCast with your host Phil.
And I'm Brian.
And Nate.
I'm Glenn.
I'm Sam.
All right, and we'll see y'all next week.